Good morning, Dawg Nation. I am Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by ServPro. Jam-packed, as you would expect. Two great guests. It's Jake Fromm before we're done. Always happy to have him. It is Connor Riley, who was with me in Knoxville on Saturday. Great to have him, too. All of that as we look kind of what happened for Georgia on Saturday against Tennessee, and of course also what comes next as Georgia tries to keep its edge with an off week coming before the big showdown against Alabama 2 Saturdays from now. And off the top of the program, to lead us into that discussion today, interesting, I would say, revelation may be too strong, but it is revealing, so, semantic game maybe, of something that Kirby Smart apparently told Kirk Herbstreit during a private conversation that was not, broadcast, was not an interview on air, but Herbstreit getting some information from Kirby that I think is valuable for you. We'll start the show with that and give you a real-life example of maybe just how true that is. It all makes sense in a minute. We're glad you're with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by ServPro, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by ServPro. Cleaning, restoration, construction.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
A very quick word of warning before we dive into today's content. You're about to hear something. Many of you, no, not all of you, some of you are very astute, you're nimble, you're able to move with the information. But a portion of you, some of you, at least one of you, is going to perhaps make a mistake here in a moment, and I want to try to prevent you at the onset of this discussion from making this mistake. You're about to hear something, and it's going to be interesting, and that's what we try to do. We try to give you interesting content. You're going to hear something, it's going to be interesting, and then immediately you're going to think it's about one thing, when actually it's probably about something completely different than that. Now, you may be wondering, what is BA about to say? Well, we're going to get into it here right now because obviously the aftermath continues of Georgia's win against Tennessee on Saturday. Everybody's talking about it, including the guy who was a part of the broadcast team that called the game. We would just still say the most prominent analyst in college football, the most important voice our sport has. I hope he uses that power wisely. It is Kirk Herbstreit. Well, Herbstreit has a podcast now because I guess he was the last one. Now everybody does. This was literally, I think, episode 1, if I saw this correct on YouTube, of the Herbstreit. Now, he's doing it with Joey Galloway. They have a tie together from Ohio State, their time there. And the discussion came up about the game that Herbstreit called. And as someone that, does high school games, and I'm not putting that in the same category of what Herbstreit and Fowler do, but we do try to, put a lot into our broadcast. My good friend, broadcast partner, Rusty Manziel, we have conference calls with coaches. You get extra information. It's always kind of fun because, I can't get a college coach to tell me anything. But, in a high school situation, because I'm the broadcaster of the game, they understand that they can, give some information to me they may not give to other people because I'm not going to say it to anybody. This is not an interview. We're not broadcasting this. I'm not going to go tell this. I need background information to be good at calling the game. And the coaches want that because they want their team to be presented well on air, tell a good story, just reflects positively on the program. And so there's a little bit of cooperation between the main broadcast partner and the program that does not always exist between, certainly at the college level, between the coaches and the other media. Most of you have some intuition about that is as true, if not more true, than you maybe even realize. So I'm going to play a clip from the Herbstreit podcast where Herbstreit reveals, based on his private, behind-the-scenes, conference call style conversation with Kirby Smart. Not an interview. You can't go online to hear this. This is just what Kirby told Herbstreit in private about what he thinks about his Georgia team here right now. And quick warning, one more time. When you hear this, some of you are going to be tempted to fall prey into what I believe is an error and what I believe is a mistake. And because we're all in a good mood, Georgia's coming off a big victory, I'm going to try to prevent that from happening for you. When you hear this, don't accidentally get tricked into thinking this is about one thing when it's not actually about that. This from, I guess, Sunday is Kirk Herbstreit.
Kirby told me on Friday, we were on a Zoom talking about the game. He said, I don't know. I really don't know yet how my team's going to respond to this. I can just tell you this. I like the makeup of my team. I like we are more of a team than we were a year ago. There is definitely something going on that I'm seeing. That's what he said to me on Friday. And then to see a team get down 21-7, and then to just kind of like go, it was like a heavyweight boxing match. Just take some hits, throw a few hits back and forth. And they catch a break there at the end by the kick going wide right. But just the fact that they put themselves in that position.
So very interesting stuff. Kirby Smart, as retold by Kirk Herbstreit. Herbstreit says to us that Kirby Smart said to him, I like my team. I like my team more this year than I did a year ago. There is something going on with this team. And obviously, as Herbstreit suggests, that's not all completely proven by the game against Tennessee because, let's be honest here, we're thrilled about the win, but it's not like Georgia went up to, Tennessee and just completely took the place over and totally annihilated the Vols the way that it has in previous years. That was a close, hard-fought game. It could have gone either way. So the game itself is not validation of it, but the fact that Georgia got up off the deck after 21-7, the fact that Georgia kept throwing blows back at Tennessee when Tennessee was swinging the haymakers at Georgia, the fact that Georgia stayed as competitive as it did, giving itself the chance to outlast Tennessee, that is maybe proof of something. And now you maybe have a little bit of an idea of why I say be really, really careful that you don't hear something that Kirby Smart didn't say as relayed to us by Kirk Herbstreit. You may think that's about something or some guy, but I think the actual truth of what Kirby was trying to convey to Kirk Herbstreit is far greater than that. Now, let me tell you why I have a bit of a suspicion about what some people might be thinking, because what Kirby tells Herbstreit is essentially a confirmation of something I said. Are you familiar with the social media platform now known as X, formerly Twitter? The other day, I put this out on X. I said, and this is September 4th, so I guess that's after Georgia's first game. All of these weeks run together. I said on X, I don't yet know if Georgia is a better team than it was in 2024, but I get the sense it is a happier team. That's what I said. And the responses I got to that, many of them, assume that what I was talking about there, and to be very clear, you should understand the way I use social media. I can't have notifications on my phone. The idea that my phone's going to ding every time somebody does whatever, I just can't have that. I would, and I mean this literally, I would go crazy. I just wouldn't be able to handle that. So I really am not that aware of my, what you call mentions. I don't spend a lot of time in my mentions. I mostly scroll through there to find people that I feel like look like are part of our community, and I enjoy seeing stuff from them. But the rest of the stuff, I can't go dumpster diving and that kind of thing. What every reply guy is going to say, it's just not good for my soul. I really don't spend a lot of time doing that sort of thing, but broadly aware of what's being said. When I said this looks like a happier team than it was a year ago, even though I didn't make any mention of Carson Beck, people assumed that it was about Carson Beck because there are some people, and listen, God loves these people, but nonetheless, there are some people that just can't stop fixating on quarterback, whoever the quarterback is, whoever they wish the quarterback was, or whatever else. Some people just can't move beyond the quarterback and consider any other player in another position. There is just a fixation with quarterback that some people can't solve themselves from. And that's their business and whatever else. But if you remember around the time that I tweeted what I tweeted, we did a show about what I thought was a pretty happy and connected Georgia team. And in that particular topic, we didn't mention quarterback at all. We didn't mention Gunner. We didn't mention Carson. We didn't mention Stetson Bennett. We didn't mention Jake Fromm. We didn't mention David Green. We didn't mention any Georgia quarterback. On that particular day that we talked about Georgia being happier than it was a year ago, we actually talked about Dwight Phillips and how Phillips had scored a touchdown in 2024 against Florida. And after the game, Kirby Smart had gone on about how much everybody likes Dwight Phillips and then how happy they were for him to get that touchdown against Florida, which was not a large part of what happened for Georgia last season, just kind of an interesting footnote to the game against Florida. And then this year, though, it certainly seemed like after week one that Dwight Phillips was going to be a much bigger part of the Georgia roster. And I said this may be an example of popular player gets a larger role. That means the players around him are going to be happy because one of the guys they like is going to have a chance to succeed. That's basically the topic we did. If you're a regular listener to or viewer to the show, you might remember that we did that at the time. We weren't talking at all about quarterback, not talking at all about Carson Beck, who's now at Miami and likes football again. But people assumed that we were. I think the same kind of false assumption could be made here. When Kirby Smart says, boy, there's just something going on with this team. I like this team. That's what Kirby Smart apparently told Kirk Herbstreit, as relayed to us by Herbstreit. I think people assume that that is a condemnation of whatever happened on last year's team, which admittedly, and I don't make any bones about this, I don't think the vibe, based on admittedly second and third hand information, that's about the best I'm going to get, second and third hand information. I don't think the vibe on last year's team was particularly good. It is I believe, objective fact that Carson Beck contributed to some of that negative atmosphere. That is true. And yet, without getting too deep into details, I don't think that was the only thing necessarily going on, if I'm being honest. So, I mean, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence, things like that would point to some of that. So I won't deny that last year's team, I don't think, had a great vibe. I do think that Beck was at least partially responsible for some of that. But as I said, even during last season, I don't think he was exclusively responsible. And I think that's fair to point out. Either way, though, when you look at this year's team here right now, Kirby Smart says, I like this year's team. Something going on with this team. I like the way we fight. I like the way we're doing things. And it's almost like his quote that you just heard there is exactly what I said. We're like, I don't know how it's going to work out for us going into the game against Tennessee or any of the game this year. My way of putting that on X was, I don't quite know if Georgia's better than it was in 2024, but I think they're happier. Kirby Smart certainly seemed to express a happiness with his team. And now that I've established that as a premise, let me see if I can give you some proof in the real world, tangibly, of what Smart means when he says, I like this team. Yesterday we spent almost the entire show just being happy. I think that was the appropriate way to be after that particular game. Just the emotion of the moment, so thrilling to see Georgia win a game like that, that it's almost incorrect to move off of that too quick. We try to be careful not to do that. But now that we've had time to celebrate, now that the 24-hour rule, so to speak, has expired, now you can get into the nuts and bolts from the game, and we've certainly done some of that. We'll do more. Obviously, one of the issues is the Georgia defense. To the naked eye, in real time watching the game, it seemed like Georgia had some massive busts a few times where, oh my gosh, Tennessee's hitting not just explosive plays, but 70-yard touchdown, whatever else. Brazel, the receiver, has 3 touchdowns, 170-something yards receiving overall. Not a good day for the Georgia defense in no uncertain terms. If you give up more than 40 points, if a receiver has that good of a day, if Aguilar, the quarterback, who I thought was fine for the most part, is just slinging these moon balls and they're just landing in the somehow, some way in the intended target, or at least close to the intended target, all day long. Not a great day for the Georgia defense, but even in the midst of that, when you listen to Kirby Smart talk about his defense, when it clearly had some stuff that went wrong, once again, y'all, you get some evidence that Kirby's just okay with it, that he thinks this team has the ability, has the opportunity to work through whatever its issues are right now. I want to play this for you. So I guess it was a little bit hard to hear the questions in the Saturday press conference. The mic for the media was muted or not muted, or is distorted somehow. But I believe the nature of this question was, hey, after your defense gives up 40 whatever points, are you worried that there's going to be a loss of confidence from that group after that? And y'all, I know that sometimes you have this on in the background or you're doing 5 different things. Do me a favor. If you can listen carefully just for a second, not to me, my loud mouth, but listen to Kirby Smart. I want you to listen to what Kirby Smart says about the fear that some might have that this defense confidence will be shaken after some bust on Saturday. You think Kirby Smart doesn't like this team? Listen to what he says after his defense, had a bad day on Saturday. Kirby still finds a way to show some affection for these guys in the midst of all of that. I would say this confirms what Herbstreit said Kirby told him. Take a listen to this.
Oh, they didn't. That defensive group in there, they ain't losing their confidence. One player may have a little doubt, but that group in there, they think they can stop anybody anytime. That's a fun group to be around. They do in overtime. They thought they were going to go block the field goal. I mean, they believe, and they're a confident group. Now we got to play smarter, but look, that's a hard game to prep for. We worked the hell out of our guys to get ready for that game, and probably overworked those guys. It came down to things that we didn't not execute. We got beat over top or didn't make a play. And it's frustrating because I thought that we would play better defense.
So at the end there, that's what you expect to hear from Kirby Smart. I'm frustrated because I thought we'd play better defensively. That's what you expect to hear from Kirby Smart because high standard doesn't yield to, anything less than his expected best. That's what you expect Kirby Smart to say. But in the midst of saying I'm frustrated and you got to play smarter and you got to blah, 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 he says, this is a fun group to be around. This is a fun group to be around. Even after giving up 40-plus points at Tennessee, this is a fun group to be around. I'm telling you right now, I take that seriously. And not because it guarantees future wins. As I put on X a couple of weeks ago, I still don't know how good Georgia is. I don't know that we know how good they are after the game against Tennessee. If you look at some of the advanced stats from that game, Georgia and Tennessee played each other about equally. They played each other to about a flat-footed tie on, if you care about success rate and per play basis and blah, blah, blah. It's about a flat-footed tie on a per-play basis. But in the only thing that actually matters, the scoreboard, Georgia found a way to get the better of Tennessee on that metric. And I can't discount the vibe within the team that seems to be contributing to some of this. Kirby Smart talking about his defense is maybe evidence of that. Now, there's also the typical Kirby thing, too, of, okay, so now after being pat on the back, and goodness knows after 2 weeks of beating up against, pretty soft competition, we were doing some of that patting on the back. Now this defense does need to figure out where do you go now that you've been challenged. And let's make no mistake, Kirby hadn't gone soft on anybody. He's still talking about that as much as he ever was. This is also what he said about that on Saturday.
Yeah, they grew up. I mean, look, defense for 2 weeks has heard about how good they are. They got punched in the face. I did think we played the run well early, and then we started having to make some adjustments to sacrifice some on the run to protect the guys. And the past, we've played them well. We didn't give up big plays. Today, we didn't do that. And it's not all on the corners. We didn't have a guy in the middle of the field. Should be a guy in the middle of the field. They can't throw that ball there the first one. You misjudged the ball. I mean, they're correctable things. It's a good thing. And we really weren't beat. We just misplayed it. And that's tough to swallow.
So on our post-game show on Saturday, Jeff Santel asked me a question. Was there ever a moment, obviously not just as an objective member of the broadcast media, but as a Georgia fan who wants Georgia to win the game, was there ever a moment in which during the game I was really thinking that Georgia was not going to win? And I had to be honest, from the very beginning of the game, some of my worst fears were coming to realization in that in previous games, Josh Heupel against Kirby Smart, Georgia has not given up the big passing plays. That crucial component of the Tennessee offense was essentially non-existent. Well, from the very beginning of the game on Saturday, Tennessee was getting some stuff in the passing game. Tennessee was getting some of those big passing plays. And it was an indication right away that this game was going to be different than previous Georgia-Tennessee games had been. I don't necessarily advocate for live betting, but if you are a live bettor, that was useful information at the beginning of this game that this was not going to have the same script as previous Georgia-Tennessee games with these two coaches had perhaps had. And Smart acknowledges that too, that we were giving up more big plays than we had in the past. And I think that speaks to the larger truth in college football overall, is that we had a blast in 2021 and 2022. When Georgia's winning every game by 40 points, if you can't have fun with that, then something's wrong with you. This is not that version of the sport anymore. And the truth is, the era from about 2018, where we saw Alabama Clemson, 2019 with LSU, pandemic in 2020 was weird enough on its own, maybe Georgia in 2021, and then obviously Georgia in 2022. That, what'd you call it, like a 5-year period? That's pretty much an outlier for the sport overall anyway. We just haven't had that level of imbalance and dominance the way we had for that period. If you look at the 130 whatever year history of college football, that was itself kind of the outlier. Now we're back to not quite total parity, but certainly more parity than they existed a few years ago. And for Georgia fans, you are constantly being asked to make peace with that. We got to win a game that my defense doesn't dominate in. We got to win a game in which my offense maybe doesn't play quite as well as it played on Saturday. All of that could be in play for Georgia this season. And I cannot guarantee to any of you how it's going to go. But I do plan on watching. I do. And I plan on remaining optimistic. I certainly believe anything is possible because I take seriously what Kirk Herbstreit apparently heard from Kirby Smart, that Smart sees something going on with this team. The belief here is that these players like each other. They like the mission that Kirby Smart has put them on, the fire, passion, and energy they've tried to give birth to. That's starting to take shape throughout this roster. And every game that we think is hard is still going to be hard. Some of the ones we don't think are going to be hard, they may surprise us, and they're pretty hard too. But this team seems ready for what's coming next. And that, I think, is the best news we can get today. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by ServPro. Glad you're with us, however you get to us, live on video, 10 a.m., on demand on video anytime after that, radio podcast, Apple, Spotify, everything else. Just thrilled that you're here. Huge thanks as well to our friends at ServPro who make it all possible. Look, ServPro, really important. We are in that time of year. If you think about September, October, November, this is really hurricane season. In oftentimes the Gulf, can be the Atlantic. And as that weather moves in, obviously storms then move inland. And so, unfortunately, we have way too much experience with this in recent years. It can create weather-related catastrophes. And in a situation like that, it's really amazing. And I've talked to some of my friends at ServPro about this, the franchise operators, and they'll tell you stories of entire city blocks and multiple, in some cases almost like multiple blocks, huge swaths of a community. ServPro ends up showing up the big mobile command center. That's a giant truck, looks like I describe it as kind of like a NASCAR hauler, shows up, runs point on the entire operation. That ServPro really is the restoration specialist there, capable of handling a large-scale job. A large-scale job like that, they're capable of doing that. But that's not all they can do. If you've had your own issues, something much smaller, at least I hope it is for you. Maybe it's a grease fire in your kitchen, or maybe you had a pipe burst in your attic, or a roof issue or something like that. Water intrusion, fire, that creates huge damage for you too. And it may not be as big as something that affects an entire community, but it's an impact in your life, and you want it cleaned up and you want it put back together like it never even happened. And that is what ServPro also wants to do for you as well. So I want you to find them online. It's servpro.com. Now, it's spelled this way, S-E-R-V. S-E-R-V, servpro.com for more on that today. I hope that you will check them out. They'll get your property back to its previous condition, get it looking like it never even happened. Also, each franchise independently owned and operated, which is a very good thing in its own right there as well. We're so happy to have ServPro as a part of DawgNation Daily here today. Now, we've also got two great guests coming up in just a moment. We'll hear from Jake Fromm, the former Georgia quarterback. You better believe that Jake's going to have an awful lot to say today. We'll get to that in a moment. And we'll talk to Connor Riley coming up in just a couple of minutes' time. But prior to that, though, let's already go around the doghouse. Poured today by our friends at Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. And as I said, we've had the time to celebrate. We're happy. Oh, my gosh, were we happy? Still happy. I've bumped into just a few Georgia fans in my real life walking around last few days, and everybody's talking about it. I mean, it was one of those games that I think we're going to be probably talking about for quite some time, and I'm glad to be a part of that. But we also have a job to do around here. You got to get into the football part of the football game, and as we talked to John Stinchcomb about yesterday, oh my goodness, is there some concerns with this Georgia offensive line, particularly at right tackle where, and I thought that John put this pretty astutely, you had this revolving door of three guys on Saturday, but that didn't include the guy who started at right tackle for you in game 2 against Austin Peay, that it's a mess right now. I do believe that the biggest contributor to that mess is the fact that Ernest Green is hurt. I'm not a doctor. I don't pretend to be. We do have, medical people we bump into every now and then, and, they seem to be of the belief that, it sounds like he's a little bit more hurt than maybe some fans probably realize. I at least take that seriously because I think when healthy, Ernest Green's a good football player. I don't think he's healthy right now. And I get why he doesn't want to be thought of as injured. Obviously, Georgia wants its guys as healthy as it can possibly get. I understand the nature of the conversation. We just all see this in our own eyes right now. Ernest Green does not appear to be healthy, and I hate that for him because I know he dealt with a different injury last year. You just hate to see it. But somehow, some way, you got to figure out what to do at right tackle here right now. And this is one of the things that Kirby talked about after the game is trying to figure out who a guy was they could put over there on Saturday. And in our mind, we're also thinking, well, is this a guy that can stay there moving forward? This is what some of what Kirby Smart said about that after the game.
I didn't know they made the change. Stacy told me in the headphones he thought that Bo was going to play better, and he thought he would finish stronger than Uni. Uni was getting a little bit sloppy and a little bit tired. And, I think we're going to have to find a rhythm of playing guys. It was hot today. We were worried about conditioning level. We practiced hard this week. And you got to be careful you don't leave it on the practice field because some of those guys got tired, and I was proud of Bo, though.
So Kirby says he was proud of Bo, and the Bo there's obviously Bo Hughley. And I think most of the fans that I've heard from think that Hughley's been pretty positive for the most part when he's played this season. For whatever reason, did not get the start in game 2, didn't really play in the first half. I don't have an explanation for you as to why that was. But when we've seen Hughley in the game, I think some fans have been happy with what they've seen. If there is a knock on Bo, it is going back when he first arrived at Georgia. This was not a large young man at the time. I want to say, y'all fact check me on this, I want to say he may have been down to about 250 at one point, which is obviously really, really small for tackle in the SEC. That'd be small for 6A Georgia High School. It would certainly be too small to play tackle at Georgia. So being big enough, I think, has been an issue for Bo Hughley. He's obviously bigger now than he was, but trusting him to be the mauler that you need him to be, if there's any knock on him, that might be the case. In the case of Michael Winnie that Kirby mentions there, and I'm not trying to be too soft, I'm just, I guess, trying to give a more balanced perspective. I almost don't blame him. He's just not a tackle, I don't think. I think that Georgia's really glad to have Winnie. I really do. And I think he's better suited at guard. They just need somebody at tackle, so he's been a guy they've called on. But I don't necessarily think that Winnie's just a tackle. I don't think that's where he needs to be playing. So, whatever the option is moving forward, it's more him as a part of a competition at guard and not, I would say, at tackle. Just did not look to be nearly as, comfortable there. One of the things I said yesterday was, if he's healthy, the guy I might want at tackle is Juan Gaston, because people who know this far better than I do, closer to the situation at Georgia, closer than I am, they were convinced during the summer that Juan Gaston was one of their 5 best offensive linemen. And he is almost certainly a future offensive tackle on this team. I believe he's based on the chatter that I'm hearing, I'm not a draft scout, but based on the chatter that I'm hearing, I think that Gaston has a chance to be a future first-round pick as an NFL as an offensive tackle. So if that's his future, then how about we get the future going here right now? Georgia had a freshman right tackle in 2017, won the Rose Bowl. So, it certainly can do it. You don't really want to, but you possibly could. And I'm oversimplifying this, of course, but I'd be hopeful that that's, once you get the clean bill of health on Gaston, I'd be hopeful that that's maybe where this is going, especially given the fact that another freshman in Dontrell Glover apparently earned positive reviews once again for how he played on Saturday. Now, do you want freshman on the right side? Ideally, maybe not, but it seems like Glover's doing some good things. And by the way, picking it all up apparently very, very quickly. This is what Kirby Smart said about Dontrell after the game.
Oh, yeah. I mean, geez, a freshman guard coming in here and playing? I mean, incredible. I don't know how he played. They were saying one of the runs that we thought we should have scored on. We kept having to kick field goals in the red area. One of them, they had a run through, they said was his. But, I mean, he didn't come mid-year. Like, this guy shows up, and he played on a great high school program, well-coached, really well-coached offensive line, and walks in and just starts playing, and he's natural, picking things up. I mean, where would we be without him right now? He has been a blessing for us. We got to get Juan healthy, too.
Yeah, so Juan healthy, Glover doing what he did. Maybe it's freshman on the right side. And listen, I realize, I'm saying, well, this guy's okay because he's hurt, and this guy's okay because he'd be better off playing guard, and these 2 freshmen, maybe they're the guys, maybe everything's fine. I do realize that's a little too sunshine and roses for some of y'all, that I'm being too soft. I get that. I do. I'm very much aware of that you think I'm being too soft and all this right now. Well, here's the good news. If you think I'm being too soft with my evaluation of the Georgia offensive line right now, that, and I'm going to use bad grammar here, that ain't what you got from John Stinchcomb yesterday. Stinchcomb takes offensive line play very personal. This is a very important thing to him. He also started on a Super Bowl champion, so he's got credibility. If you thought I was too soft on my evaluation of the Georgia offensive line after some struggle against Tennessee, John wasn't having it, including the notion that if it ends up being Glover and Gass on the right side, that's somehow a good thing. He says, if that's what you end up going with, your two essentially youngest guys, what does that say about the rest of the offensive linemen? Here's John from yesterday.
What a condemnation of the guys that we have on that roster. And I say that with all due respect. This is an era where these are paid professionals. This is no longer amateur sports. These guys that are a part of this roster are being compensated. And we've got a number of players that have been a part of this program for a few years now that as we're looking at this, you're saying arguably our two best, and I'm not disagreeing with you, are folks that haven't been on campus, that have not even had one single season under their belt, but yet have surpassed guys that have been on this roster. And I say that to almost challenge you of like, where are you at? I mean, you're getting paid to be here, and let's call it what it is. If you're a professional in this sport, you need to perform.
So listen, I've gotten a lot of feedback from John, and I think 99.9% of every Georgia fan I've heard from is both in agreement with John and glad that he said it. So I get all of that, and I think that John obviously has a ton of credibility when he says that. And yet, I still can't be that worried if it ends up being Glover and Gaston compared to, if you're going to compare it to the true league where they play for pay in the NFL, at some point this year, somebody in the NFL is going to put a street free agent in the game. You know what I'm saying? You're going to pick a guy up off a waiver wire or something like that. You're going to, off the street, you're going to put him in there. You're going to start him. You're going to trust him to do his job. Maybe college football is looking a lot more like that, where, yeah, Georgia does not have enough offensive line depth, but will probably never have the same level of depth that had it again that it once had before. For instance, when like Broderick Jones was a backup offensive tackle in this team, and he became a guy you could insert into a game. I don't know that you're ever getting back to that level of depth again, but pretty clearly the reason why you've got the offensive line issues you do, and John is so correct to point this out, is because some guys are just not playing to the standard that Georgia needs them to. So if they're not, then maybe it's the young guys who get their chance. We'll see how they respond to all of that. And that is Around the Doghouse. It's poured today by our friends at Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. Now, I'll tell you right now, with no Georgia football on Saturday, this is a great weekend to go up to Mercier Orchards right there in beautiful Blue Ridge, Georgia. It's one of the most gorgeous experiences you'll ever have. And one of the things that I love is how often I hear from people in our audience who say, yeah, BA, I've been there. I've seen it. I've done it. They were going up there to enjoy all of this before we even started talking about Mercier Orchards here on DawgNation Daily. And now we hear from people who are like, well, BA, I can't quite get to Blue Ridge. I'd love to go there. It sounds awesome to see a couple hundred acres of orchards stretched across these North Georgia mountains. It's the most picturesque scene you're ever going to see. I can't quite get there, but for all of you, we can bring the taste of Mercier Orchards to you. And this is one of the things I want you to be really aware of, is that if you've never tried a hard cider before, this is an alcoholic beverage, comes in a can, you can, in a restaurant over the tap. If you've never tried a hard cider before, I'm telling you right now, you need to try Mercier Orchards hard cider. Or if you've tried other hard ciders, you're going to find out that this is the best tasting of them all because it's locally grown right here in Georgia. And it's just good for your soul to support local companies like this who are doing great things, who are contributing to the beautification of our state and obviously the economy of our state by growing and developing these beverages based on the fruits that they're growing right there on their own land. this is an incredible thing to see. And the flavor profile across the array of tastes that they offer when it comes to Mercier Orchard's hard cider, there's going to be something you're going to enjoy. You know, they have the Grumpy Granny. It's kind of I think you'd call it like a tart. You know, there's a little tartness to it, but you can also get the Just Peachy, which is obviously on the much sweeter end. And the way these fruits blend together, the apples and the other fruits that they use blend together to create these flavors, it's really amazing. It's worth trying. So I think the easiest way to find out more about this is to go just search Mercier Orchard's hard cider. Mercier is spelled Mercier, but you can also go to the website mercier-orchards.com/hard-cider. That's why I like to say just search Mercier Orchard's hard cider. Also, when you're searching for it at your local grocer or your beverage store or at your favorite restaurant, if you don't see it, ask for it. Say, hey, BA from DawgNation Daily says there's this great tasting hard cider called Mercier Orchard's hard cider. And tell them, I'd like to try that here. It's locally grown in Georgia. I want to support this local company. Can you, as my supermarket, can you, as my beverage store, can you, as my restaurant, help us do a good thing here for a great local company? I believe you'll find the answer to that question may end up being yes, and you'll really do a great thing by helping spread the word on all that. We're happy to have Mercier Orchards as a part of DawgNation Daily, Mercier Orchards hard cider. So it's Jake Fromm. Before we're done, how about now everything involving Georgia against Tennessee? Big win, and where we go next. Let's speak to Connor Riley here right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Way too many things to discuss here. We're going to try to do the best we can to get it all in. Georgia wins at Tennessee on Saturday. Connor, I guess let me begin with what has been the general theme going back to the beginning of the week was this was one of the most thrilling Georgia wins that I can remember, and we've had a lot of those here recently. I think somebody said, it's 3 overtime wins in Georgia's last 6 games, which tells its own story. And I know people talk about the Tech game, and they should, the SEC championship, and they should. But I think that this one belongs on the shelf with, I mean, listen, I'm 40 whatever years old now. I've seen a few of these games at this point in my life, and this was about as much fun as I've been a part of. Can you tell me something about that before we get into the nuts and bolts of the game?
Yeah, I just walking out of the post-game locker room where you have the empty stadium, I'm coming out like, did I really just get a chance to watch and cover and now get to go write about that? And I did. And, you know, look, we've been very fortunate in recent years to see a lot of great games. I think the back and forth nature from the beginning of that game, where yes, Tennessee got out to an early lead, but Georgia pretty clearly was able to make a game of it going into halftime. And it was a back and forth nature throughout the afternoon. I think that elevates that game above the Tech game where it was just a furious comeback and above the Texas game where for so much of it, it was a slog to sort of just get to the fourth quarter and overtime. I mean, those two teams could have kept playing for another 2 hours, and I think it would have gone back and forth like that. I think somebody early in the first quarter of that game just said whoever gets the ball last is going to win this game after the opening drive. Georgia got the ball last in this game, and they ended up finding a way to win it. And I'll give you credit, BA. You know, we were talking at halftime, and one of the things when Georgia's trailing at halftime I like to do is just go around, hey, do you think Georgia wins this game? You came out, and to your credit, you had said Georgia scores in the first drive of this opening half here. They're going to win the game. And to your credit, they absolutely did that. 14-play drive that I think really helped establish the tone there in the second half of this team. And they found a way to win when I think a lot lesser teams out there, including teams ranked in the top 10, would not have continued to fight the way they did.
So I appreciate you giving me the credit for that. And we really haven't talked enough about that drive to begin the third quarter. I think we're going to do more of that tomorrow. I do have to confess this, though, which, once again, not just as like the objective analyst trying to, you know, make sense of a football game, but as an emotional human being, a fan who wanted Georgia to win. I got to tell you, it was a punch in the gut for me after Georgia did assert itself on the drive as well as it did. I mean, really just running it down Tennessee's throat. I thought, that's the flex. This is Georgia. Tennessee's about to wilt. But then when Tennessee retook the lead, man, I thought whatever goodwill that Georgia had gotten from that drive had maybe been given back. Now, taking that much time off the clock and doing what Georgia did, it was still crucial for what ultimately resulted in a win. but it ended up being far less symbolic than I probably thought it would. So I appreciate the credit, but the humble part of my brain does have to acknowledge that even after having said that at halftime, I became much less confident once Georgia squandered a couple drives after that, and then Tennessee hit the big shot to Brazel. All of a sudden, that big third quarter drive to begin the second half started to feel more like a distant memory than I would have preferred.
Yeah, and if Georgia had lost that game, that drive after the KJ Bolden interception, I think would have come under a lot more scrutiny, where you can understand Georgia, I think, wanting to continue to establish a run just given the success they had had in the previous drive. But there were people in the press box saying, hey, I think Georgia should be a little bit more aggressive here. You get a touchdown and go up 10. You really flip this game on its head. And credit to Tennessee. And look, I know this is a Georgia partisan show. I know there aren't a lot of Tennessee fans here. I came away so much more impressed with Tennessee in this game than I was going into it. I think you look at their schedule the rest of the way. Yes, they still have to go to Alabama. They've got Oklahoma coming to their place. But if they're able to split those games, I think that Tennessee is going to be a playoff team. You could absolutely see this team in the SEC championship game. I think they're going to get healthier at the cornerback position. It's a credit to Georgia for taking advantage of that. From the jump, the 45-yard pass to Colby Young on the outside, I thought really set the tone for what ended up being the story of the day, Georgia's passing offense. But this was a playoff game. It was a playoff game a year ago in Athens. It wouldn't surprise me if we're back here in December talking about this as another potential playoff game.
And I'm not thrilled. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm not thrilled about the possibility of it's like the old line from Rocky 2, ain't going to be no rematch. I'm not thrilled about the possibility of a rematch there because there's a lot of really good stat guys online these days. And I saw one that if you look at this on kind of a per play success rate basis, these two teams are exactly what you expect. They're about even. The percentage of successful plays as related to down and distance for both these teams about even. Then it just happens that Georgia got the better of the scoreboard, but on a per play basis, this game was mostly a flat-footed tie. That's about what you probably would have expected. It would not surprise me if they do play again, and I don't relish that opportunity, just being completely honest. But one of the things that we talked about earlier in the show was, I guess, what Kirby Smart apparently had said to Kirk Herbstreit, that Herbstreit relayed publicly, that Kirby likes this team. And if you're going to try to win a game in which you do play good competition to essentially a tie and just find a way to outlast them, some sort of positive vibe within the locker room, I do think probably matters. It's not the ultimate deciding factor, but it probably helps. And as I cautioned the audience before, people are going to want to make this something that I don't think it is. This is not, to make this, Gunner drives a pickup and Carson drives a Lamborghini, that's so boring, that's so done, that's so tired, that's so, I'm so over all of that I think there's a lot more going on here than just different personalities at quarterback. But I do take it seriously that I do think there is maybe a good vibe with this Georgia team. It didn't prevent you from giving up 40, and it may not prevent you from losing to whoever you play in the future. But I do think that there is a connective tissue with this team that the 2024 team did not have. Do you agree?
I do, and I think there's one person in particular that sums this up, and it's Oscar Delp. We heard in the spring from him a year ago. Kind of felt like he had one foot out the door, that it was a team that had a lot of guys that knew it was going to be playing in the NFL next season. 13 draft picks, I think 17 or 18 or 15 or 16 guys that made opening day rosters from last year's team. And this year's team, because it is naturally so much younger and so many of its better players are not even necessarily draft eligible at this point or on NFL radars, you have guys that have a little bit more to prove, that have a little bit more invested in this season. And I think of someone like Delp, and credits Cody Chafin's being in the right place at the right time, where after the game, he gets Oscar coming off the field, and Oscar, who had a massive catch early in this game, I believe right before Georgia's field goal before halftime, and a play that I hope doesn't get forgotten, where he just leaps up and just kicks a Tennessee defender.
It was essentially a crane kick, right? I mean, it's been fun to me to watch how Karate Kid lore has become popular with Gen Z and younger. I've loved to see the rejuvenation of the Karate Kid franchise. He essentially put a crane kick on the Tennessee defender.
Yeah, and that's the PG version of what I'm allowed to say with regard to that play there. But as the video that Cody it was Cody's video that was just flashed up on screen after the win, Oscar, who is a very emotional player post-win, you think last year after the SEC championship game in Texas, he's screaming 4-0, 4-0. never lost to Tennessee.
It's great.
And for
It's
him to have
great.
that kind of emotion and that kind of investment, I think speaks to maybe something that is slightly different from this year's team to last year's team. Where last year's team, when they beat Tennessee at the end of the season, it really felt like a relief. It felt like, okay, we've gotten to this point where, like, if we take care of business in the last 2 weeks, we'll be in the college football playoff. I think this team knows it has a lot more to prove. Certainly showed that on Saturday, and I think Oscar Delp summed that up perfectly.
All right, so we've talked about the offensive line a good bit. I don't necessarily want to do that right now, if you don't mind, although I know you have plenty of thoughts. I know you've written about it at DawgNation.com. Let me do defense instead, because Kirby's pretty calm on Saturday after giving up the 40-plus points. Kirby's always calm when you sometimes think he might not be. That's just his MO. But I think you get where this is coming from, that Tennessee is a particular kind of opponent. That has been always understood. This is not a slight to them. This is just a way of understanding it. They are in the category of almost triple option, in that you do things against Tennessee that you really don't do against anybody else. They try to do stuff against you that no one else will try to do. So I don't necessarily make that big of a deal of this. I think that Georgia will have a better chance of getting after quarterbacks for teams that play even a half a second slower than what Tennessee plays. But just overall, where does the defense go from here? Because it was, just factually not a great day when you give up more than 40 points.
Yeah, to your point, and a lot of NFL people have made this comparison. This Tennessee offense is a little like those Baylor offenses in the 2010s when Art Briles was there, just because of the way they open up the splits and the way things don't always necessarily translate to the next level. So you're not going to see something like that again. You're going to see great receivers in 2 weeks when Georgia has to play Alabama. They've got Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams, and you're going to see great receivers down the line. And Chris Brazzell was a great receiver for Tennessee this past Saturday. And Georgia's got to find a way to get that cleaned up. It is not a new issue, in my opinion, that their cornerbacks have had trouble making plays on when the ball is in the air, where they're in good position. They are technically sound in that regard, and that happened with Daniel Harris. The Ellis Robinson one is a little bit more unfortunate. He was supposed to have some coverage help there in the middle of the field. And then if you're going to interfere with someone, you just got to take them down. You can't. There are no half measures when you're committing a pass interference. I think that these corners where, so much of it was, okay, they were going after specific guys. They were going after whoever wasn't guarded by Dalen Everett. And I think that that's going to be something where I'm very interested in the response we see from Daniel Harris, the response we see from Ellis Robinson, and Ellis is really interesting to me in particular because he's been covered, I think, a little bit like a backup quarterback would, where everyone wants to see him. There's an excitement with him and how he can potentially play. He's been someone who's been a 5-star recruit, the best cornerback prospect in America. And when you're knocked down in a way that Ellis was on Saturday, I'm very interested in seeing how he responds and what that toughness looks like. And it's not saying that can't be done, because I think Keely Ringo in his time at Georgia in 2022 faced something very similar, where he was a highly touted cornerback prospect, and he got beaten coverage a couple of times, and you heard a lot about him. I think Keely goes out and he plays excellent, ironically, against Tennessee. And then at the end of that game, you have the moment with Kirby and Keely walking off the field together. So I'm going to be very, very interested in seeing how Ellis Robinson in particular responds, because going forward, I think you're going to continue to see both Daniel Harris and Ellis Robinson rotate into those cornerback positions.
All right, let me finish with this real quick. We will hear from Kirby Smart today. You are in Athens to cover that. It's obviously off week, so any kind of update on injuries, he's got extra permission to give us nothing on anything like that. So any preview of what you think we might hear from Kirby today, obviously knowing there is no game on Saturday?
I think the status on Ernest Green and Juan Gaston and what they look like moving forward, where Ernest was not able to finish the game, and you wonder if maybe he is set to sit out even longer now as they try to get him healthy. And then Juan's usage in the game is probably what about I expected it to be. It did not start. They rotated him in. And then late in that game, with it being as close as it was, they rode with a healthier Dontrell Glover. As he continues to get more healthy, I'm curious to see what his role looks like on this team, because I think they like Dontrell Glover a lot at that right guard spot. And can they possibly get something out of him at the right tackle position? We haven't seen it yet in this season, but we know that that's something where I think long-term, that's probably where his future resides. And they were just playing him at right guard to get him on the field. Well, the future might be now with Gaston, especially if he is able to turn a corner health-wise and get healthier going into that home game against Alabama on the 27th.
Connor, great stuff. I tell you, I've loved your coverage all year long from Athens, doing a great job there at DawgNation.com. It continues today. I appreciate that. Thanks for being here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by ServPro. And we'll obviously look forward to our chance to speak to you here very soon.
Yep. As always, it's a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
By the way, another great guest coming up in a moment, Jake Fromm. You think it's on a good day to have a former quarterback on the show after Gunnar Stockton did what he did on Saturday? Big throws. Jake's going to give us more insight on that coming up in a moment. But prior to that, let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And can I just give a shout-out to Star of the Seas? This is really one of my favorite parts of the show because I love talking about this kind of stuff. Y'all know I love Georgia football. But I also love fun vacations, too. And I think that everybody listening to me right now deserves one. And I'll tell you one of the things I love about Star of the Seas. It's all of the new and interesting things that Royal Caribbean makes a part of a ship like this. You know, for instance, I've not been on Star of the Seas yet, but I was on its sister ship, Icon of the Seas, about a year or so ago. And the thing that I love about a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation, and this is why I love telling people about them, is I will just do things on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation that I wouldn't do any other time. For instance, one of the things that's on Icon that Star of the Seas also has is called Crown's Edge. And it's an amazing, I guess I would it's like a combination between, like, say, a ropes course and almost like a zip line. And it goes off the side of the ship. And you climb up on the ladder, basically, and then you have to walk across. And you're suspended above the ship. You're going out over the water. And eventually you just let go and you go sliding around the outside of the ship. You're looking straight down on the ocean or wherever you have to be, the ocean in my case. And it's just amazing. It's just amazing. And I would never do that on land. That's not the way. I'm not an adventurous person. But I'm convinced to be a slightly different version of myself when I'm on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation, and that's why I think you should try one too. So Jessica Slater's standing by for you right now. You can reach out to her, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. All right, let me begin with this. So I saw where Paul Finebaum, and I feel like I'm the only one that ever knows this. I always feel crazy because I feel like I notice things that people don't know. So Finebaum, when he does his own show, I think for the most part is fine because he's talking to just SEC fans for the most part. But every time he goes on one of these, ESPN shows based outside of the South, crazy stuff always happens. So he goes on SportsCenter on Sunday and he's doing, I guess, a contrived segment. And are you in or are you out? And now he says he's, I guess, air quotes here, out on Arch Manning, after a couple of weeks ago saying that he thought that Manning was already better than Tim Tebow, which was laughable at the time. But to now backtrack on that, I'd say is even more laughable. And I'm sorry, this is what happens. You take the guy that's supposed to be our guy, the big prominent voice that talks Southern college football, and you put him on TV on one of these, New York-based sports centers or Get Up or something like that, and you basically just turn him into a clown because the producers push him to say all this crazy stuff that he eventually has to backtrack from 2 weeks later. They're doing him a disservice, but ultimately that's his own personal responsibility. They're doing the rest of us a disservice by dragging it out there like that. Now, as we told you yesterday, I don't know what to think about Arch Manning right now because I thought Manning was probably going to be good, but we're 25% of the way through the regular season, and it hasn't happened yet. So maybe being out on Manning is the wise choice, but you can't say that after having said what you said before. I think you got to own it and basically, if you want to write a storyline for yourself, you're the one that remained patient. All the naysayers are saying what they said, but you never change your mind. That's how you write the storyline. This is obviously something far worse than that. Speaking of storylines, potentially interesting when you know that, was it Brent Pry, was that his name? The Virginia Tech, whatever his name is, last name is Pry. He's now gone from Virginia Tech. That job is open. And we do think that rumors of Virginia Tech hiring are going to impact the SEC, probably. And yet, all the way at the top here when it comes to Shane Beamer. His father's obviously the legendary former Virginia Tech coach. Beamer spent a lot of time around Blacksburg. Folks are wondering, would Shane Beamer be interested in the Virginia Tech job and therefore leaving South Carolina? South Carolina is a better job than Virginia Tech. But Virginia Tech may be an easier job than South Carolina. And this is the problem you always run into in coaching. You see this in high school football too, where in Georgia there'll be 100 high school coaches that change jobs, every couple of years. Every year there's 100, and it's the same coaches every couple of years because people just get impatient. And eventually, oftentimes with a program, you bump into your ceiling. And South Carolina had a great year a year ago. Can you be even better than that this year? not easy to do. I mean, look at this. I mean, South Carolina just lost to Vanderbilt on Saturday. You know, they have to play Missouri this Saturday. And you know how good Missouri's been through 3 games thus far this year? And it's every week like that for South Carolina. I think that Shane Beamer is a good coach. I think he's recruiting well there. I think he's got a real personality that has been pretty attractive for folks in Columbia. But South Carolina is a place that's really hard to win. And it's not any easier to win in Virginia Tech, but they seem more willing to tolerate losing. And I think that, like I said, I think that Beamer's a good coach, but I think he's also a smart guy that would consider quality of life. And the quality of life in Blacksburg compared to Columbia just may be better. I also think this is pretty good leverage for him if he wants to use it as such. In other words, this may not be, to use a double negative, this may not be nothing when it comes to Shane Beamer and Virginia Tech, although it's just rumors right now. I was going to do something on Nico and the transfer portal. Let me just save that for the moment because I want to get to our next guest here and get ready on the show. Kroger Fresh Take here to bring on Jake Fromm right now because obviously this is a great week to be talking to a former Georgia quarterback because the current Georgia quarterback had himself a day on Saturday. Jake, what did you make of the throws that Gunner is making? I'm going to mention 2. Actually, I'm going to mention 3. It's the first big deep throw to Colby Young where it just, I mean, you couldn't have created that in a lab to look any better. There's the one to, is it Branch, in which he stands there and just gets absolutely annihilated. And then there's obviously the 4th down throw to London Humphreys. These were some of the biggest throws we've seen a Georgia quarterback make in a minute. What did you make of the day for Gunner on Saturday?
With his arm and then work the 3rd down and red zone with his legs. I mean, he's just using all the skills that God gave him and Bobo using them too and how they can best, utilize the offense to move the ball down the field and score points. But, man, Gunner coming out swinging and just nipping all the naysayers in the bud with the very first slow go to Colby Young down the sideline was incredible. Obviously, the 4th down play to London Humphreys for a touchdown, a very, very low percentage throw, right?
Yeah.
You only needed 6 yards, and we're throwing a 35-yard touchdown to London Humphreys. So a huge ball. Man, it shows Gunner has a lot of guts. He has a lot of trust in his guys, and just an overall very clutch performance. And he did exactly what was needed to win that football game.
So this is going to sound like a rhetorical question. I don't mean for it to be. I'm honestly curious of the answer. Why does Georgia do this so much where I'm going to oversimplify it, but it just almost seems like, it's Austin Peay who really cares, and we're just kind of getting through this. And then this game, I'm talking about, I was there. I mean, it's loud, it's intense. Tennessee's playing well offensively, which puts extra pressure on Georgia to match everything they're doing. But it's almost as if, well, now Georgia's interested because now people think we can't do this, and now it's actually hard, so I guess we better go do. Like I said, I'm oversimplifying it, and I'm embellishing the story. But they do this a lot where they're just better when the moment seems hard. How and why does this seem to happen so much for Georgia?
I know exactly what you're saying here, Brandon, and I wish I had a better answer for you. I mean, I've lived it. I mean, we've played against Alabama national championships and SEC championships, and you got to throw the ball to win, and you do a good job of it. And then you also have times where you play down, to opponents. So I maybe it's just because Georgia for us is under a microscope, and we knit and we pick at every single little detail, and maybe we get some false truths of looking at it from a big lens and way up high from these other schools. Man, they just always seem to have it going on. They score a bunch of points versus everybody and all this and all that. So maybe that's a little bit to it, but I don't know. There's something to be said of playing your best when your best is required. I wouldn't necessarily say that was Georgia's best, especially on defense, but it was what was required to win that football game, and they got it done. A big SEC road win, hostile environment, possibly stole that one, and it was great to have that one under your belt. That team grew up a ton on Saturday in Knoxville, and I think that's going to be worth a ton as this season progresses and down the road.
So there's the one moment I mentioned this moment ago, and I think it was to Branch. I hope I'm not misremembering that, where Gunner knows he's going to, he sees it coming. He knows he's about to get blasted, hangs in there, releases the throw. It's a completion, and he got every ounce of it. What's that like for Gunner, and what does it do for his teammates when they see him willing to and that's not even pressure. That's physical danger. Like when he doesn't flinch in the face of physical danger, what does that do for him and his relationship with his teammates?
Yeah, well, one, Gunner is a tough sucker. He's a very tough dude. You can just tell by the way he plays the game, how he gets up. He's not afraid to put his body out there on the line, and nothing to me pumps up a team more and earns more respect from your teammates than being a tough quarterback and taking hits and getting up, and it just sends an electric juice throughout the entire sideline. The guys rally around it, and they freaking love it. So Gunner being able to do that, I mean, just the respect from his teammates is just increasing more and more by the day. And then obviously add in the big time throws, add in the plays, and getting it done when it matters. Man, Gunner is he's doing well by his teammates right now.
So I heard Kirk Herbstreit say something, and I think this is interesting. I know you know Gunner well. You can probably describe this better than the average person just seeing on TV. Is that Kirk kind of said he looks like he lives under a squat rack, that, you know, sometimes on TV in a uniform, especially compared to the other guys in uniforms, it doesn't necessarily stand out. And his press conference demeanor is also mild mannered. That people don't realize there's a little bit of a thickness to him. He's not 6'5", and he's not, you know, this hulking Adonis necessarily. But, you know, I've been, you know, around him, and I can see some of this too. And Herbstreit's talking about his legs, and he's getting all kind of specific with the description, which I won't necessarily go into. But there is a bit of a thickness here for some of the running that I don't think people realize, that this is not a you know, a frail, wafy guy here. That there is some thickness here that gives him a chance to get some of those hard yards on the ground, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's played into his skill set. Gunner is a thick and very, very strong individual. Loves the weight room, eats it up, and it is given him a lot of success. I mean, with his legs, he's an athletic dude, and being able to have that kind of meat on your bones allows him to take some hits. And this SEC schedule is heating up a little bit. We'll see how Gunner's body reacts to the entirety of a season after getting hit and pounded on over and over and over again. But he is well prepared to take it. Coach Sinclair gets those guys right, especially the quarterbacks. He does a great job of giving each position exactly what they need. Not every position needs to be coached the same, and Coach Sinclair does an excellent job in the weight room getting those guys ready.
So the time we have left, I'm going to try to squeeze in a couple of more issues on that, because you talk about, you know, Gunner's a runner. I don't mean to rhyme, but one of the things that Kirby, I think, said on Saturday, I want to make sure I understand this, is that it sounds like they would like him to run up the middle more. Not to say they don't want him running outside, but Kirby said something to the effect of, Gunner needs to understand that if you take it outside, you might get 2 or 3, but if you find the seam in the middle, basically just slipping through the defense, you might get 6, 7. You might really create a big advantage offensively that way. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it seems like they like the idea of Gunner finding those seams within the interior of a defense, in between the blocking protection, more so than being Michael Vick, Lamar Jackson, trying to make everything happen around the outside edge.
Yeah, so what Kirby's trying to say here is, if Gunner decides in his head to run, he wants him to stick his foot in the ground and get north and south. That is the straightest, the quickest, the shortest distance between 2 points of the straight line. And that is basically that. Hey, stick your foot in the ground. Let's get north and south. And if we are put in a position where we're going east and west, let's get our eyes up, and then let's try to utilize our arm and push the ball down the field in these scramble situations. So, there's a few times throughout the games where, Gunner's trying to beat guys to the sideline. SEC football is a little different. Everybody's got speed. It doesn't matter if you're a linebacker, a defensive end. Obviously the secondary and the skill positions are pretty quick as well. So it just, hey, if we're getting east and west, we're getting this thing strung out to the sideline. Let's keep our eyes up, and let's try to use our arm and push the ball down the field here.
So I want to ask you one more question, semi-related to that in a moment before we let you go. Let me remind folks prior to that, it's our Kroger Fresh Take. Awesome day to have Jake Fromm on the program here today, and all of it made possible by our friends at Kroger. And obviously, you got a big weekend coming up. No Georgia football. Now you're probably still watching football. I know I plan on doing that. But you're also maybe getting out and about and enjoying stuff with family. Fall time of year. I like corn mazes and stuff like that. So you want time to enjoy all that stuff. Kroger gives it to you. The Kroger Boost membership, great way to take advantage of that because you still got to get your groceries. You still need all of that. Well, with Kroger, you can get free delivery, free pickup, and you can earn twice the fuel points on the things you're already buying at your local Kroger. So find out more about this online. It's Kroger.com/boost. That is Kroger.com/boost for more on that today. All right, Jake, one more thing for you. And the other thing that we heard from Kirby as it relates to Gunner, and obviously so many big throws and great game, one of the things that it seems like they also want to see a little bit more of too is that Gunner doing more, I'm going to oversimplify this, but staying in the pocket to help the pocket get established and the protection take place. Now, I asked this to John Stinchcomb yesterday, the former offensive lineman, who's obviously challenged the offensive lineman to be as good as they can be. And he sort of half-kiddingly said, you try staying in that pocket if it's collapsing the way that it sometimes did on Saturday. So John's obviously going to hold the offensive line to a high standard on that. But can you also speak on this too, whether it's dropping back too deep or giving up too quickly? What is Gunner's responsibility in establishing a pocket that gives the offensive line a better chance to create the protection that he needs?
Yeah, I mean, Gunner's job is to stick his foot in the ground at 8.5 yards and hitch back up into that pocket area. I'm going to take Gunner's side and John Stinchcomb's kind of position on this of, hey, this is much easier said than done.
Sure.
There is a revolving door. There's injuries. I'll call it for what I see it and the way it is. I just don't think that offensive line has played all that great in pass protection. And that is messing with Gunner's internal clock. There are max protection opportunities, and during those max protection play calls, I mean, he's getting hit a second and a half after that back, after the snap, and as soon as he gets that back foot in the ground, he's getting hit, and that should not be the case. So I really kind of feel for Gunner on this and trying to figure out that internal clock of what's going on and what he has time to do. And, that's why he's, you kind of see maybe with happy feet back there and trying to get east and west so he can see things going on and he feels more comfortable out there. So this is going to be something that isn't going to get fixed overnight. It's not going to get fixed over the bye week. This is going to be something that's going to get marginally better week in and week out. It's going to be something to monitor throughout the season. But I think for Georgia and Gunner to be his best, he's going to have to at some point get very, very comfortable in that pocket and start delivering the ball from there. But also don't get too carried away because what makes him Gunner and what makes him great is being able to extend plays as well. So it's a delicate dance he's going to have to battle throughout the season. But I think for him to be the thrower and the passer that he needs to be, we're going to have to get comfortable in that pocket.
I think it's well said, Jake. Great stuff. Appreciate you being on a Kroger Fresh Take here today. Love talking to you, especially after Georgia gets a big win like the one they got on Saturday. We'll look forward to seeing you soon here on DawgNation Daily and our Kroger Fresh Take as well.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. See you next week.
Great stuff. Yeah, I mean, we're lucky. Strong analysis of the performance from Gunner Stockton by Jake Fromm there. I really enjoyed that, including, hey, here's what you can do to improve, and here's how you utilize your skill set the best, because, as Kirby said, the legs that Gunner possesses, as impressed with those legs as Kirk Herbstreit apparently was, if you listen to that full podcast, that gives Georgia an extra dimension. How you use it wisely really does matter. Great stuff from Jake Fromm on that as a part of a Kroger Fresh Take. How about a couple of golden shoes we'll say goodbye to here today? Let me start with our guy Bassin Dog, a longtime member of our community, big presence on social media for a long time. He says there's one letter that stands out for the Vols, and in the stadium they have the VOLS. The letters that stretch across the stadium, and he's highlighted the L. Yeah, for the 9th straight time they took an L against Georgia on Saturday. We love that. Also, how about this? One of the members of our community, Johnny Surf Dog, writes in to share this. It's funny, I messed this up. I made this graphic and I put my tweet on top of this when it's actually Johnny Surf Dog doing it. We'll give Johnny full credit here for a big performance. I need to make sure I give him full credit. I messed that up. Johnny had an amazing long swimming performance, and he sent this to me. That's the picture of Johnny, a part of our audience. I put the wrong tweet to go with it, so that's my error. But we'll give Johnny Surf Dog a golden shoe, and we'll come back and fact check ourselves tomorrow, offer a correction on exactly what it was that Johnny was able to get done. Either way, we do know this. He was down there participating in that Gator-themed event. Speaking of those lousy, stinking Gators, about 1,774 days That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That is our Gator Hater Updater. And it reminds me of this. I may need y'all's help with something related to our Gator Hater Updater for, I guess, Thursday's show. I'm going to talk to you about this tomorrow. So some of you who are a little bit more industrious than I am, I may need your help on something. We tried to do something. I even got Cody to do it, and Cody's far smarter than I am. Neither one of us quite got what we wanted, so we may need your help on something. I'll tell you more about it tomorrow. Either way, we'll see you then. DawgNation Daily presented by ServPro. We will look forward to talking to you then. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews cool down. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs, they show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on all of that today. So in the entire going on 11 years of doing this show, I've only, and I'm talking about the entire time, this is a true story, I've only had one sick day in the entire 11-year history of doing the show. Now, I've taken 8,000 vacation days, but just one sick day. So my reason for saying that is because what I'm about to say, I don't say lightly. I had a little bit of a voice thing going on. My voice is clearly better today than it was yesterday. It is true that using it a little less seems to be helping. So I am going to do a shorter cool down for a little bit here as a way of just not talking quite so much. And I don't say that lightly. I don't want any sympathy because I don't participate in discomfort, but I can't deny that I have a little thing going on, and not speaking seems to be helping. So we are going to shut up a little quicker today. Let us see what else. Frogger 2000 says we need Bo Hughley, Warren Gaston, Daniel Calhoun to learn fast. And I do know that Calhoun's not a name you're hearing very much right now. I've always been a big believer in Daniel Calhoun. I won't pretend to know why it is that his name's not coming up more prominently now. I can't speak to why that is. All I can say is I am like you. I have noticed that it's silent around that name at the moment. That's really all I have to offer. SEM Dog says the offensive line with the highest ceilings all seem to be their first and second year. Typically think of guys that being a year or two away, but that's our quandary. We need them to play a lot right now. We're seeing some growing pains, but I think we'll see improvement from the group as the year goes on. So let me say something that's probably dumb, but I don't have much of a filter by the time we get to the cool down. I know it's really against Georgia's typical MO, but I wonder if they just need to play a little faster. And now if you're going to go bigger with Gaston, it's going to be harder to play faster too. You can't do both necessarily. But if they are having some issues with what they think of as their traditional offensive line protection, I wonder if just playing a little faster might help with that. Like I said, that's probably dumb, but it is the first thought that comes to my mind of, hey, if you start trying to get rid of it quick and you start trying to move fast, maybe that alleviates some of that. That's also more screens, which y'all don't want. But maybe now what y'all think of as too many screens, at least some of you do, maybe now that starts to make a little bit more sense about why that is. DT laughing at me for, I think he may be also laughing at Basson for his L on the golden shoe, and maybe also me on the mistake. Yeah, so I like to make a lot of the graphics that we use. I don't make them all. The ones that look good, I probably didn't make. The ones that look pretty rudimentary, I probably did. And every now and then you just move a little too fast, and I took the tweet from the beginning of the show and slapped it on the golden shoe as opposed to the other. I wonder if we could do this. Could I perhaps, let's see if we can do this. If I send an email to our friends, let's see if we can get this on here. Let's see if we can do this. So assuming I sent the right thing, which I sort of did blindly, let's see if we can get Johnny's tweet on the screen. So if we have folks on the other side of the wall, see if you get something from me to see if we got that. Scott Bolin says, take care of your voice. I lost mine for 2 years. It's no joke. Yeah, I do want to do that. I have been researching it a little bit. I talk way too much. I just do. But I also talk for a living. Some of the things that I am doing differently, and, like a lot of guys, I just, for most of my 20s, I didn't really use sunscreen. I certainly should have. I just didn't. Got a little wiser as I got older, started using sunscreen. As I get a little older, I'm trying to eat better. It's not easy for me to do, but I am trying. I've certainly cut down on what you might think of as vices and things like that. I've cut way down on stuff like that, just because, you don't live forever. And, I want to be around for whatever purpose I am on this planet for. I want to be here to fulfill it for as long as I possibly can. So you just make better decisions as you get older. One of the things I've always been bad about is okay, I come in here and talk all week long, but I've always coached my kids' teams and stuff like that. I'm out there at practice and I'm yelling all the time too. And so I really have been very hard on my voice, very hard on my voice. And so now, my daughter's got some stuff coming up. My son's been having a bunch of sporting events, and now all I do is clap. I'm clapping and being, enthusiastic, but I'm not yelling in games anymore. Not that I'm not. I was never really. If I say yelling, it makes it sound like I'm, sports dad. I'm not really yelling at anything, but now it's just a clap. Just clapping. Trying to save my voice a little bit more, because you do realize. It's essentially just overuse. I'm guilty of overuse. Spencer Clark, going back to eating better, says it's the carbs past 40. Yeah, that's basically my thing. Basically the carbs, during the week, I don't eat very many. Okay, so we do have Johnny. Let's see if we can show Johnny here. Okay, so Johnny completed the Isla Mirada Lighthouse swim on Saturday morning, that's how that's pronounced for those in Northeast Georgia. The 4-mile ocean swim, 4-mile ocean kayak around Alligator Lighthouse, 2-man relay team called Dawgs. Dawgs took down the Gator Lighthouse. Then we watched Kirby's Dogs take down the Vols in an overtime thriller. What an epic day. Ain't it great to be a Georgia Bulldog? Like, how great is that? It would have been awesome to give full credit for that on the show. My error prevented that from happening, but our crack team, Kaylee and Jay here today, helped us get that done. That's awesome. What a great thing for Johnny. Anytime Dawgs can take down lousy, stinking Gators in a Gator Lighthouse, we're loving all of that. But yeah, as some of our YouTube folks have said, pretty much avoiding carbs is amazing. And this is not a good thing, but it is just my life. From January through, let's say, July 4th, I have a tendency to gain a little bit of weight. Try not to. It just seems to happen. This year, I hope to avoid that, but does seem to happen. But it's always amazing is post July 4th, always get really serious with the upcoming season. You're just moving around a lot, and carrying extra weight as you're moving is just hard. I think my preference would be just to be fat. I think I'd rather just be fat. I like being the happy fat guy, but it gets to be hard moving around when you're fat. And so therefore, or at least as fat as I would sometimes get. And so, it's just better to be a little thinner. And so it's amazing from July 4th through the start of the season. I want to say I've done this probably 4 years in a row, maybe 5. I'll basically lose like 20, 25 pounds, boom, just like that, because I like to move a little better. I like to be a little, just a little more energetic, and I'll take anything I can get. Let's see what else. Let's get some YouTube comments. G. Gray says, what lesson? I'm not going to read that. Now, for those of you mentioning like sort of like the brown liquor and stuff like that, yeah, there's been plenty of that in my past, but I've also found that does not seem to coincide very well with trying to lose 20 pounds. I've sort of discovered that. I have discovered that. Mr. Wise, yeah, I noticed this too. He was doing the Monday night game last night. Fowler was really hoarse last night. So think about what Chris has been doing. Georgia game on Saturday, U.S. Open, and, like I'm essentially a robot. I do a show every day. Fowler doesn't do that. So this is the busiest time of the year for him. It's when tennis overlaps with football. And I thought that Fowler was really hoarse last night. Really, I did notice that. John Paul Williams says his dad had voice issues. They found out it was a medication. Yeah, in my case, that's not going to be the case. But yes. And really, I mean, I'm mostly fine. I mean, I think today, if I hadn't said anything, y'all wouldn't have even noticed. Yesterday, going back to hear myself, hopefully I hear it more than other people do. I heard it in my voice yesterday. You may notice that I'm trying to talk a little softer right now just because I yell all the time. But hopefully we can just be relaxed during the cool down. The whole thing is about cooling down anyway. UJ Marine checking out. Appreciate you being here. Randy Hall asking about our high school game for this week. We got a good one on Friday. We got Hebron Christian against Blessed Trinity. A chance to showcase DJ Jacobs in that game, which I'm really looking forward to. Hebron Christian is a defending state champion as well. So two really good teams on Friday night. Really very much looking forward to that. By the way, it's also been mentioned that, Robert Redford's passed away. Really sad. Really sad. The best of Robert Redford obviously was before I was born, but still a really good actor even in my lifetime, and obviously revered as an all-time great. Also, I think there's the weird meme that's out there that I think people think is Zach Galifianakis. That's actually Robert Redford, the one from Jeremiah Johnson. I don't know how many people maybe necessarily know that. But yeah, I mean, Redford just an all-time great. All-time great. Crow King 123 says, how do you think the defense attacks Alabama got a lot to work on? Yeah, no doubt about that. I mean, obviously, I think that they're going to hope that they can get Simpson to hold on to the football just a little bit longer and give him a chance to get after quarterback in a way they really not able to do against Tennessee. Tennessee just gets rid of it really, really quick. And Aguilar is certainly doing that. Stick D's on the subject of the very emotive Tennessee fans. Yeah, there's a lot of that comes out. Now, look, I'm going to seem, once again, too soft for saying this. I do think that the TV broadcasts sometimes take way too many liberties with showing people on television. And it seems like there's this and I know, like, I'm not trying to make this too serious because it's mostly all just for fun, but it somehow gets treated that if you show up in a stadium that you've essentially agreed to an informal contract, anything you do can be just blasted all over the internet for the rest of your life. And boy, I don't know that seems all that fair to me. And I can tell you this, when I'm on camera, I, for the most part, know that I'm on camera, but boy, I can't stand the thought of being on camera without knowing that I'm on camera. That seems terrible. So I do enjoy all that too. And the sad fan, we did a sad fan golden shoe yesterday, so I'm a total hypocrite by saying any of this. I completely understand that. But, using the sad fans to tell the story of a game, that seems like a huge invasion of privacy. And, it's almost like if I attend a game as a fan, want to wear a shirt that says I don't consent to being videoed. Not that's going to stop anybody. Jonathan Aaron asking about the potential of an Arch Manning injury. I really don't think that he does. I think the whole wincing thing was proven to be something that Manning typically does. It would concern me that maybe Arch has allowed the possible injury storyline to linger because, hey, that's better than the alternative of him just not playing very well. That's what would concern me. Miriam Corbin, the subject of Robert Redford, one of the handsomest actors I've ever seen. Yeah, no doubt about that. I mean, he was obviously, the archetype for, I think, a very long time. The archetype for that. What is my favorite Robert Redford movie? I guess probably The Natural. I'm trying to think of other movies I've really liked him in. Kaylee says The Way We Were. I don't believe I've heard of the movie. I don't think I've ever seen that before, which is weird that she's seen a movie that I haven't. Just because I'm so much older than she is. But I don't think I've ever seen that movie before. I'm trying to think what I've really liked Redford in. Yeah, I mean, great actor. For some reason, let me pull up the IMDb. I hate to do this, y'all, because we're trying to talk football, but I'll be one of 8 million people searching his IMDb right now. What am I forgetting that I really like from Redford? Yeah, obviously Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid. Incredibly, respected movie. Yeah, so All the President's Men I've seen. Ordinary People, I actually saw that. But yeah, I mean, an all-time great. All-time great. I guess a lot of these, now that I'm looking at, aren't necessarily my favorite movies, but certainly an all-time great. Yeah, so obviously a big, long resume there for him on that. All-time great for sure. John Paul Williams mentions 3 Days at the Condors, The Sting. Yeah, I guess, I mean, I've seen a lot of movies from before I was born, but I guess for some reason, while I certainly respect him as an all-time great and, know the iconoclastic figure that he was, I guess come to find out a lot of these weren't necessarily my favorite movies. Kent Holcomb also the subject of voice. And I'll tell you this too, speaking of the voice stuff, what stood out to me when we had Scott Cochran on the show the other day, his battle with addiction, he said, started because of a voice issue. That the pain that he felt from screaming at practice caused the headaches that first caused him to turn to painkillers. So that's a serious thing. Very serious thing. Matt Rukavina says, looking at Alabama, you remember the Ryan Williams versus Bolden, hope he works on his ball skills. Yeah, I mean, obviously big motivation, I would hope and think, for Georgia when it comes to shutting down Ryan Williams in that game. I think that's the case. Miriam also suggesting to gargle with warm salt water several times a day, drink tons of water. That's the one thing that always shows up, is drinking a lot more water. And I'm trying to be better about that. I used to be really good about drinking a lot of water. And somewhere along the way, I just, I don't know, I got a little lazy when it comes to the drinking of the water. But I'm going to try to do more of that. Let's see what else. Baggins and Friends says, just behave yourself in public. I don't do any bad stuff. I'll tell you a quick story. When George was playing TCU in the national championship game, one of the local news stations did a story about Georgia fans flying to LA, and they had they just used like an overhead shot of the airport. And I happened to be walking by in the airport, and I'm not camera shy. I'm on TV and video and stuff all the time. But something about being on TV without knowing I was on TV freaked me out. All I was doing was just walking by. I think the thing of it is that when I'm on the show, I come across as this very, loud, big talker, life of the party maybe. But in my private life, I'm just not like that. Yeah, I would say I'm mild-mannered, maybe taking it a step too far. But I'm a lot more low-key in real life than I am sometimes on the show. And so, I don't know, to be videoed not knowing that I'm videoed, I don't know, I wasn't thrilled about that. All right, let's do a couple more, then we're going to go. Let's see what else. Stick D says, it's my belief that this Vols game took our players to the next level, approaching elite status. Yeah, I do think when a team comes together, when any organization comes together, it typically comes together around something. And I do think a win in which, it's one of the reasons why I think that Georgia leans into doubt so much. That feels to some people like a cliche of Georgia's trying to push the same button it's pushed before. But I think a lot of that's maybe more important internally than it is externally. that I think that Kirby Smart does not like externalities. And so when something happens that forces them to turn inward, I do think they like that. And I think that creates a bond that they can use the rest of the season. Kirby's Belt says his old movies are better, but old movies are almost always better. Yeah, listen, I do tell you, man, I have really enjoyed, as someone who, wasn't alive during the 70s, go back and watch a lot of these. I mean, the 70s is a great era for movies. Great. And as somebody who's not a 70s child, I feel like I'm, objective, incapable of saying that. Great era for movies. Movies were just more interesting back then, certainly compared to now. Even the last 20 years, we're just not making movies in this century for the most part that were as interesting as a lot of the best of the as I said before, I think the 80s were a great era to be a kid. Great children's themed program in the 80s. But if you like adult themed movies, I'm not talking about like X-rated, I'm talking about just movies made for adults. I'd say 70s and 90s were better than the 80s, I believe. I believe that's the case. But 70s a great era for movies. Frank Patterson says, I'm excited that Apple looked at the UGA schedule when deciding to launch their new iPhones. I won't miss any games while at work. Well, that's good to know, Frankie. I'm glad to hear that. And it's great to have you checking in here today. That's awesome. Low Country Dog says, my favorite movie is the 2021 national title game. I'm right there with you on that. I love that. That's awesome. All right. Let me get a couple more. We're going to go. Savannah Bryan says he's old enough to remember when an ESPN analyst said the Dogs didn't have a chance against TCU. Yeah, I'm sure you can find all kinds of stuff like that. Georgia certainly thrived on it. DT says Georgia and Tennessee are both works in progress. They're each going to be better by the end of the season. Could very well be true, and I think you're probably right. I still think the SEC is too difficult to make sense of right now. I mean, we're about to see a lot of these teams start playing each other more. I think last year the problem we ran into from an evaluation standpoint was not enough of the middle-tier teams played each other, and not enough of the best teams played each other. I'm hoping there's a bit more sensibility this year where, last year we just had a pecking order because of the 8-game schedule that was hard to sift through at the end of the season. I'm hoping that this season gives more clarity, and I'm telling you right now, part of the reason why I'm thrilled about the Georgia winning against Tennessee is I can't say with certainty where Georgia goes from here. I hope it is, as some have suggested, the springboard that gives Georgia a chance to win all the games it plays the rest of the season. But assuming that there are losses coming, I'm glad that Georgia won this one. I'm glad they gave us that chance to celebrate on Saturday. I think the rest of the season is still a bit of a mystery, mostly an unknown. That's probably true for Georgia and Tennessee, but as DT mentioned, there's a lot to like about both teams right now. So that's the story on that. Let me say goodbye to you for right now. Y'all, thanks for being here on R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Y'all find R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised. The price is promised. You can trust them on all of that. Hope you have a great day. Trust them if they have a plumbing issue, if your water heater needs replacing. Don't take cold showers. That's awful. R.S. Andrews, in many cases, can replace that water heater for you the same day. But you got to find them online at rsandrews.com. We are back tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by ServPro, and we will look forward to talking to you then.